Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a great viewer question, and that's once again to sort of stay on the topic of understanding and dissecting psychopathy. And really sort of what are some of the red flags or traits or tactics that you can identify and kind of observe as an indicator so you can take heed and take warning. But oftentimes the problem is that with the psychopathic manipulation, when they're trying to get one over on people, or really what it is gain a sort of unassuming or unquestioning trust. In other words, feeling as if you are just in the hands of your Savior, or the answer to your prayers, or the love of your life, or the business partner of your dreams, and everything is so swimming and sailing, and or it can then be but then turning the opposite, which becomes very scary, and it oftentimes doesn't compute and make sense. So in terms of, so the question is, I think, does the individual, do they have sort of a self-esteem, or why do they have this penchant, this tendency really to sort of go after others? In other words, why do they sort of have, what is that mechanism? So of course that's a big question. So we'll talk about it because I think a lot of people want to understand, why do they feel that they've been targeted or sort of hounded on or pursued or made as a bait for unknowing to themselves. They didn't realize that someone was getting in and doing this. So it was really like in blind sight. You can't observe it. You don't have the senses to perceive it, or you're not really have the wherewithal or the alignment, because really an addiction ensues, which keeps your perspective from being clear. So it's kind of like an anti-venom, or venom, if you will, of a psychopath. So if they can get you into that addiction, then they can make you powerless, and then they can get in and work whatever it is that they want. So maybe they want you always calling, they always want you to be there, they want a companion, they want to know that they've stopped the show, they've stopped the traffic, that they've stopped your life, they've taken you to the top of the hill and then down to the valley, whatever it is they want to be or become or convince others of. So they get on this sort of mission, if you will, a sort of psychopathic crazy train, where really when they go after a pursuit of something, is it because they have self-esteem, because they value themselves? In other words, they have positive self-regard and are sort of independent, or what is that mechanism, and how does it throw people off into sort of being addicted and unable to be really in your own skin once again? It becomes a very strange alchemy of really awareness and consciousness, which is very much intended. So when people feel out of sorts, completely shocked, almost like they have undergone a literal feeling of literally being in a state of shock, almost where you might feel that you're that traumatized, you are that stunned, you're just so surprised. I mean, your body literally can kind of go into a state of shock where you haven't visited, you've never been there. So it's your body's self-protection mechanism trying to get you to pause, freeze, look, alert, stay still, like pay attention to me, not what's going out there, but you've got something in here. So it becomes a natural built-in defense mechanism that people don't understand. It's like getting a tool in a toolbox, and you're like, what do I do with this? It's like a feeling, which is a tool, but you don't know quite what to do with it because you haven't seen it, you haven't felt with it, but you do then have this problem, and you don't know how to sort of connect the tools with the solution, because things literally become haywired. They become miswired and misfired, and the psychopath will manipulate through really sort of an energetic charisma, so sort of something in energy that you feel. You might say that person comes on very strong, they are very resolute, they're bold, or they're bigger than life, or you just might have some sort of awe, just this person's amazing. they stand out to you. There is something remarkable. This person is different. This is a cat of a different color or what have you. And so it kind of throws you off, but people then are usually, it's in a positive way. So they're like, yeah, and then they're kind of feel like this buoyancy or fun, and as if it's going to be a positive exchange. So there becomes this interest, and then there's usually some sort of immediate reward that you get from them. Eye contact, a touch on the shoulder, a smile, a sort of nudge that you haven't received. Something that's going to give, it's just like a big flare that they put up, like a big emotional flag that signals that you should get involved, and then you fall for it. You fall in love. You fall for the hook, line, and sinker. You take the big plunge, whatever it is. You do somersaults, you do backflips, pirouettes. I don't know what you do. You do the chop, you do the reggae dance, but you fall like head over heels. So there's this very sort of unstable, I would say, beginning. Not unstable, but meaning takes one out of balance from their usual. Sure, all love relationships do, but we're talking really dramatic shifts. We're not talking about like, oh my God, like we're going to go out again for dinner and stay up. We're talking about big sweeping changes, like, all of a sudden right there in the parking lot or right there, bam. I mean, they give you some sort of signal. They just give you that like confirmation and that confidence, and then you feel this confidence in return. So everything is, sky is the limit. So they have this way for people to then disband their boundaries, which means listening to themselves. Really, ultimately, their self-talk gets sort of ground down like a, what do you call it, a pedestal, where it just it becomes, basically insolvent. It becomes unable to be tapped into as a source of value. It's like an emotional insolvency. You lose sort of a reservoir of value within because it becomes all external. And then the person's sort of front is that they're going to have their way, that they are, 25 feet tall, and then they're, 18 feet wide, and I'm getting through here. They just get through. They just have a way, a bossiness, an energy. There's something that sort of dims the lights of others, and it's kind of to force them to get their way. Some are more forceful than others. I would say some are more subtle, but you get that sort of like, I'm the one in control, or that is their message, is that I am in control and you'll like it. I think is sort of the message. And a lot of people, I think, who are easy targets or low-hanging fruit or didn't know that they were being targeted, maybe have this written all over their forehead. I am lonely. I don't have anybody right now. I need excitement. I'm too serious. Whatever it is, the psychopath is like, shining their nails, licking their chops, starting to like get their cleats on and just to go after and pounce. I mean, they just sort of go all in, and it can be sweeping, it can be melodramatic, you can feel like you're in a Shakespeare, Hamlet movie or love scene. I mean, the birds just seem to swoon and chirp, and everything just seems to be like pixie dust and wild stallions in the distance, and the running of the horses. I mean, it usually has, I would say, this fairy tale. This is music to my ears, music to my heart, music to my soul beginning. This is known as the love bombing. And so they need these individuals to be able to get them into that sort of, I would say almost like a venom-like and then addicted state into the hyper-arousal, and then this immediate satisfying of needs, oftentimes, which have not been met in a long time. So there'll be sort of this scarcity mindset, or just sort of desert-like mindset, or, in other words, I've been through a long period of time without this in my life. Just sort of people, I think, feel that wow, I still have it, or whatever their epiphany is in the beginning of the love bombing. I mean, there's something that gets ignited. I mean, just like, again, with a lot of other love relationships, but this is a flame of a different temperature. I mean, usually it'll create, because they need to get people into the almost a delirious state, because that gives them the message that they're in control, so that they have the ability to make everything sort of go haywire. Meaning the things that you focus on and then hear and pay attention to, and then what they do and then how they treat you, there's generally these big gaps and delays, which then sort of set off a trigger and an alert, and then a paranoia, and then a sort of investigation and discovery with, wait, something is really off here. This is not your typical date. This is not your typical Girl Scout. This is not your typical Boy Scout. This is not your typical mother. This is not your typical father, grandfather, niece, whatever the relationship is for each of you. So it'll usually stand out. And then, so the problem then is, because there's something that feels a little bit off, I think people then become hyper vigilant and then hyper aroused to always pay attention to the other, because they've got all this going on and they don't have the ability to check in and have the checks and balances within. So they sort of lose control. Once again, oh, well, isn't that what life is about? Letting go, or this or that. But for some people then it becomes very painful very quickly when this other individual is exposed for doing something to the contrary that would directly conflict with your interests, which means it would go against and belay a trust to, a trust, which is really what they seek to create in the beginning, is this feeling of trust, which, in other words, it just seems like, usually I think a lot of people who have been targeted say they seem like they knew me right off the bat. They just seem to be very comfortable. They, even things that most people would consider secretive, they were just, sending me in a text or an email, or they were giving me their personal private information, or, pay my mortgage, or pay my car bill, or something really, extraordinary. Yeah, just write a check off my checkbook. I mean, something that creates this feeling of like, wow, this is a really different relationship. I've got a real, but it becomes a dependency very, very quickly. This is not about two people having a trust and becoming stronger independently. This is about one seeking to overpower others by the message that they are in control. They are in control. And then it makes, you don't realize that they are stripping you of your self-control. And once again, not just like, oh, I don't have self-control. For a lot of people, they really feel like they don't have control over what's happening in their life. I can't believe this just happened to my bank account. What just happened to my book of business at my job or my profession? What just happened to my kids and what I've been doing with them? What just happened to my retirement fund? Why did I just take care of this other person's children before my own? Why did I make, and then all these missteps? And then you begin to go, I think people have a gasp, almost like a hyperventilation in. They're like, they just, and then they kind of like hold their breath, and then emotionally they get sort of stuck at that fawn-like state. It's very difficult to come down, because it's almost like at the level of shock, because of the degree really of no self-esteem that this individual has. They have no empathy. They have no really value of humanity, as some people would say. So they're lacking this as a value, but they do a lot of cover-up. I mean, and they just do insidious ways of doing this. Anyway, though, so you have to realize that oftentimes there is a invalidation process of you in the process that becomes part of the control, which becomes very subtle, and then you're kind of validating them in a lot of different ways, which you can feel you thought were going to be equal, but they had no intention of it being so. They're only there to really sort of plant these seeds of self-doubt, self-demise, self-sabotage, self-scrutiny, judgment, really, because it becomes all about this external focus, and they lose almost importance in themselves. They lose almost interest within themselves. What ends up happening, their own interest ends up getting stripped away. I mean, to the point that it would not even be imaginable. people step back and they go, I cannot believe that has ever happened. I mean, that is just unbelievable. I mean, not like Guinness Book of World Records, but you're talking about this is something that is really off the charts of usual or what most people you would expect to ever encounter. I mean, it takes that sort of, that really deep, and then it can oftentimes cause a lot of ongoing anxiety and, this, anxiety of the future, but, realize that they will just sort of turn and twist and continue their engineered chaos wherever they go. So, basically if they move on, they move on. But what I want to identify is that, and do they have the value of self? And also while you're then with them, you lose, because what you surround yourself with, you will become. So when you don't realize that while, we're talking about things that are really changes that are beyond your everyday awareness. So it's just sort of to open up your consciousness and awareness to understand a little bit about human behavior and connection, that when you surround yourself with others, you subconsciously pick up a lot of, synchronicities, being on the same page, just sort of your body rhythm and understanding, and you develop to become kind of like them. You become like the people who you hang around. So people don't realize that they are going through a sort of hollowing out of self when they're around these individuals who do not really have a sense of self. They only have a sense of other manipulation. And that's what they take their fuel from. It's a very different, I would say, it's a very different sort of psychological anatomy and emotional anatomy and interpretation and meaning anatomy of it's very, very different, I think, is what I'm trying to give you and to help you to understand. So when you're around this, people don't realize that how are they being corrupted? They're being corrupted from the inside. And the people who might be psychopathic, they will say, well, I corrupted her or I corrupted him. I mean, they will just know, and they will have no guilt and no remorse. They will have not be sorry, no guilt, not feel that it is a problem. In their mind, they have done nothing wrong because they have no conscience. They have no sense of morality. People cannot believe it. You might need to hear this. You might need to listen to this a lot of times. What's underneath belays what's on the outside. I cannot express this enough. It's too really the depth of understanding that most people cannot grasp, experience, understand, believe, trust their senses, etc. Because it tries to destroy your sense of trust, which is ultimately you have that trust within. You have that trust within. That's why you are a warm-blooded individual. So you really have to get to the other side of that. Is really part of the damage. I mean, that's part of where the damage is, and that's where the foundation really needs to be restored and looked on, really the foundation with sort of rose-colored glasses, if you will, with a sense of gratitude, with a sense of appreciation of self for the very fact for who you are, like with the bit by bit that you have pulled after this experience and your awareness, you have pulled out, from under the trap. This is almost as if there's a trap that's going to fall, and then it opens and falls and it opens. Like, I'm just one of those openings. You got out and then you just didn't look back, run for your life. It's basically is the story, is the name of the game. But sometimes you have to look back because there are a lot of long and ongoing existing and remaining issues to deal with, particularly that of the emotional aftermath. So you have to realize and stop worrying about others, especially since people are programmed to become so worried then that they have a very difficult time not worrying about others. It just becomes this universal sort of mindset change or an attitude change and a self-limiting belief change that this is a pervasive global, i.e., change and shift within. It becomes a global shift or an energetic shift or a very complete transformation, or what you consider like an alchemy of your outlook and your conviction and your belief system. You just have a new sense of self-protection and awareness within that you don't ever lose touch with. I mean, you always remain in touch with this. So this is part of the understanding that in touch has to be an increased relationship with yourself at this time. I mean, it has to happen. It's like, get back, good boy, excellent girl, pat on the back. I mean, we're talking about learning your ABCs, 1, 2, 3, emotionally, right back again, because it becomes a real loss of perspective. And really, I feel a lot of the issue is because of that close proximity. And as you become if you're around these individuals, you're going to become more and more energetically like them. So do you understand what I say? More in sync, more close, more of your lives entwined, your conversation, emotions, discussions, values, how they cause a disruption of others' thought process that creates that conversion of emotional interpretation and understanding of objects, people, events, situations, and values. I mean, it becomes a whole drastic overhaul. It becomes a drastic overhaul of values oftentimes in this process, which might take place over a very short period of time or a very long period of time, but usually the end result is lacking interest or feeling of importance or trust in self, or trust then in others. It becomes this very permanent, just boom, like what, to survive. It's like a survival mechanism that kicked in like a knee-jerk reaction. So that is a positive, but you also have to realize that when is it okay to work with that mechanism and get it back under your control? Getting that mechanism of being able to trust yourself, feeling at ease, trusting your environment, without a lot of loud clamoring, the engineered chaos that, the emotions within that are just screaming so loud, you can barely think, you can barely drive, you can barely eat and, take care of self. It becomes this very loud internal roar for a lot of people that they have to be able to pipe it down. And so that oftentimes is because it's just a complete disconnect. You are not an energetic match then with this type of individual. And that needs to be acknowledged and validated and embraced and enforced with boundaries and standards that are self-defined and are internally driven and controlled and understood and related to in the wholeness of being. This is a lot of psychological concepts, but I'm talking, it's an energetic or kinesthetic shift. So it's within, it's a healing and change of perspective within, which is the long journey, but we're trying to understand the cause that creates this effect and then identify, yes, this is how I felt. I can validate this. And then this is how this happened. This is what happened. This is why. This is what we're dealing with. Okay, so then let's part the seas. Let's part the energy. Let's be able to put this over there for a little bit, even though it was enmeshed. And then let's get you over here. You're totally different. It's okay that you think totally different. You're of a different temperature. You're of a different hearken to different things in your life. You might have, real values versus just the superficial crap that they seem to get ignited in people and drive people into being addicted to them because of this hyper arousal, whatever it is that they did, that they pinpointed and needled your needs. So that is, it's just like what happens. It's, people are wondering, will it ever get better? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. But you have to understand and be okay with, this is their energy, and that's a clean cut, and then mine is over here, and that's also a clean cut. And it's okay for me to be myself, think differently, be differently, value different people, accept my limitations, or where things I made mistake, and then allow whatever it is over there to be what it is and not have to change it, not have to keep it accountable, because there is no independence. There is no functional, independent, individual who can be accountable there, because They're always sort of manipulating the other people, so they don't have a centralized. I mean, it's not going to happen. They don't have a centralized heart where you can have like a heart to heart, a this messed up, that hurt, I hurt, and then you learn and you, I don't know, whatever it is, but at least you have an amicable understanding, but with this, you cannot make amends with someone who doesn't feel that they have done any wrong. I mean, so it's an exercise in futility. So you have to understand and realize, wow, I need to take a breath of fresh air and get away from all that engineered chaos that created that addiction, this toxicity, and sort of it creates a thought disorder pattern for a little bit, and like an attachment disorder, especially into others or even to yourself. So it's okay. Don't worry about it. Let's move on. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. And I hope that the videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and for goodness sake, please donate for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Peace out, peace be within you, and have a beautiful day. Remember, a peaceful heart will help to create a peaceful life. It's okay to think in terms of thoughts of peace and healing versus the agitation and struggle. Your I am will change, and that is okay. Allow the change to shift and have that new, better image that connects with that feeling as well. What is that positive image for you? Keep striving for that and keep it in front of you. It is very powerful. Have a beautiful day.